بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد السلام الله عليكم جميعا. I think Lillahi alhamd, it's a very great opportunity to kind of be here with the Shaykh, share some thoughts and benefit from the presence and knowledge that is being shared. The topic we are looking at is the Sharia between urban myths and Islamic reality. What I'd like to do is go through almost a systemic, go through the definition of what the Sharia is, highlight its legal definition, a bit of background into what do we mean when we speak of the Sharia, and then maybe take a look at some myths which people may think are true about the Sharia and open up some questions about them. That's what we're aiming to do. Sharia in Arabic comes from the root shara'a, which can mean to begin something. That's linguistically. It also, the word as sharia actually is like a spring of water, where water has kind of descended for people, that people or animals can drink from. And the Arabs use this word sharia for a mawridul ma, a place of water that is not difficult to access. So it's something where you would be able to access the water with ease. That is almost the condition for calling something a sharia traditionally. Then we have an Islamic understanding when we say the word sharia. Now, first of all, when we're going into this, when I say the word Sharia, something has come to our minds. Everybody here has kind of perceived something. You've got some type of impression, some type of, some concept floating within your type of mental sphere of what we're talking about. The first thing is, this is a legal system. This is what Islam is telling us to live by, or which it is telling us to be governed by. The question is, first of all, that where has this actually come from, the Sharia that we're speaking of? Another question is, has this thing always been the same? I mean, when we say the Sharia, do we think that this has been something that's always been systematically the same throughout time? And I'm sure I could open it up to questions and answers and quickly get some feedback, but I think people would pretty much, the answer is no, it hasn't been the same, so I hope that is what you're thinking. The thing is that the Sharia has changed from era to era, with prophet to messenger. That the Sharia ثم لكل جعلنا منكم شرعة ومنهاجا. That for each and every one of you we placed a shir'ah. Here is referring to a sharia, and a minhaj is a way. The mufassirin with this verse of shir'atun wa minhaja have really taken two routes. Most of them have very clearly said that Allah is telling us in the Quran that for each nation there was a very particular sharia which they followed, and a particular type of route or understanding to it. The other type of understanding which Ibn Jarir Tabari kind of points out is that he says that for each ummah Allah placed a method, a way by which they could access the truth, which is perhaps less popular. The main understanding that ulama have taken is that every ummah had its own sharia. Okay? Now, we understand that, okay, each ummah has its legal system, it's had this. Okay, so what is this that we're talking? What is it then today? Is it simply, like when we're saying, okay, the Sharia, what are we exactly talking about? Its sources. This is a net result of the Quran, of the Sunnah, of its interpretation, its understanding, in addition to other mechanisms, legal mechanisms, that would be necessary to make law. Sharia is something which governs our entire life. So it's going to start with whether it's tahara, salah, the 5 pillars of Islam. It's going to go into marriage, divorce, buying, selling, the criminal justice system, inheritance. It covers everything. It is synonymous for the term fiqh. However, the ulama, when they use the word sharia, they usually, this is just a customary practice, are referring to the non-ibadat, non-worship elements of the sharia. So they're usually talking about anything that's not to do with worship. It's more to do with buying, selling, marriage, divorce, the criminal justice system, things like that. That's what they're usually using it for. That's the usage for this term. So I mean, so now we've got this understanding. This is what the Sharia is. Here's a question that we are faced with. Is this law, this Sharia, is this sacred? And this kind of comes into some of what we want to talk about tonight, about elements of myths and realities. And this will be the first question, that is the Sharia sacred? And obviously from an immediate response would be yes, of course it is, which it is, but what I'm trying to say is that we need to explore the question, because these are some of the things that are creating myths in our society. We have a lot of confusion today when people feel that the Sharia is being challenged. And it comes back to things like this, that the sovereignty of the Sharia is being challenged. That people feel that, wait a minute, the Sharia is sacred, how can somebody question certain aspects of it? Doesn't that mean you're questioning Islam? Now, by essence, we would say that the Sharia is composite of 2 type of parts to it. There is a core aspect which is sacred. Things which are clearly defined by the Quran, by the Sunnah, by things like this. Clear, definitive rulings. These things will have that sanctity to them. Then the Sharia will expand to cover your everyday issues of life. The mundane, the boring, the things which people are arguing over, everything the Sharia will expand to cater for it all. So when a person is saying things like, even to your customary usage of language will be governed by the Sharia, or the Sharia will accommodate for it. So if a person said, I know I want to buy a car. So he says to somebody, will you, look, go get me some wheels. Now is that a usage that could be used for a car? Many people do, or people say a motor. Get me a motor. Now, you pay somebody some money and he comes back with just the engine. And you're like, what the hell? What's this? And he's like, I've just done what you've asked me to do. You've asked me to go get your motor, I've got your motor. So you're like, ideal Islamic situation, of course, you're like, to the judge, let's go to the Islamic judge. With the assumption, obviously, the Sharia caters for this, which it does. Does the Sharia have a response? It does have a response. The Sharia will say, okay, we will look at the urf and the ada of that region. We will look at what is understood by people when they say that, oh, I want to buy a motor, or this is my motor, or these are my wheels. What do they mean by that? If they do mean by a car, then that person is clearly in the wrong. The Sharia will cater for that. It will pass a ruling, it will pass a judgment. Are we saying that now this term, this usage, or this saying motor or whatever has a sacred aspect to it? It doesn't. This is the Sharia accommodating for your customary and conventional usage of language and your practices. So the Sharia has a core part to it which is sacred, and it extends to cover your everyday life issues, which may not necessarily be sacred per se, but it's been incorporated by the Sharia. So why is this important? This is one of the things that it is important, because not every question which is raised at the Sharia is questioning Islam. It is a myth to think that every time a question is raised about an aspect of the Sharia, that it is a question that is aimed or hurled at Islam. It's not it may be the case, but it's not necessarily the case. Okay? Another thing is the Sharia from 1400 years ago. You see, once again, another question which you would say, yes, it is, but we need to raise the question and explore this concept, because you're right, it is from 1400 years ago. The Sharia is from then, but does it mean it's stuck there? You see, it's interesting because some of the ulama, Imam al-Shatibi as an example, a legend from Granada, Al-Andalus, very amazing Maliki scholar, who writes in his Muwafaqat that one way of understanding or getting a truer picture of Islam is really to see the early practices. So if we're thinking, oh look, I've got a hadith here, this hadith could mean this, it could mean that. I don't know, that it's mentioning that the Prophet ﷺ used to do this, or does that mean it was a regular practice? Does that mean it was a one-off practice? Does that mean it's something we should be encouraging everybody to do, or is this the exception? Or how do we understand that by just reading one text? Well, obviously, there's guidance from the ulama, but the thing is that we look at how did the early community practice it. So it's always, yes, so from one aspect you're absolutely correct that Islam, from that aspect, will always be stuck in that era. It will always be from and of that era. But then, the myth is that it does not incorporate for all time to come. It does incorporate. It does deal with our issues. It will adjust. When I spoke of urf wal-'ada, which is one of the principles upon which the Sharia is built, when it looks at your norms, obviously when your norms will change, so will the rulings. That there is a clear principle, تتغير الأحكام بتغير الأزمان. Okay, that the rulings will change as the day and age changes. So that's not talking about, oh, today we're in a different day and age, so let's stop praying salah. Oh, we don't need to be doing. That's obviously a bit. Obviously, if somebody was thinking like that, then we've got a few problems. But the thing is that what we're talking about is those rulings which are built upon convention, which are built upon, like issues of, like divorce, are built upon, a huge part of them are built upon convention. Would you know? Okay, I'm going to alarm a lot of you now. So, in a lot of the traditional books of law, you see, as an example, divorce is of two types. That when a person pronounces the divorce, that he could either be divorcing clearly, or he could be giving a kinaya, like he could use a phrase which refers to a divorce. So historically, in many of the books of fiqh, they would say that if a man said to his wife that, get out of here, I don't want to ever see you again, get lost, in other words, that would mean it was a divorce. That would actually seal a divorce. Like, bloody hell, if that was to happen today, that would be like, so the whole day and age has changed. That would no longer constitute a divorce. But it doesn't mean that it didn't apply back then. That's one example. Okay, so there is once again, it's coming back to understanding that, look, the Sharia is built upon tools. Okay, there is diversity, first of all, in it. there are sources where we're taking it from. We're taking it from the Quran, we're taking it from the Sunnah, but also from the interpretation of the people who received it and then those who came after. So everybody is kind of looking into this. I mean, the scholars are, and not just everybody. And so they're coming up with their understanding. And people by their nature will disagree. So we're not only coming to recognize that there are legitimate differences, there are also parts which will be based on convention. There's parts which won't necessarily be sacred, that if somebody questioned them, it doesn't mean it's an attack upon Islam, as an example. That's the other interesting thing is that, okay, so there's this Sharia, and it governs us, and it tells us a bit about what we're meant to be doing and stuff like this. But do I really have to be learning it? Do I really have to learn the Sharia? I mean, people are already thinking, what the hell? Do I really have to? And the unfortunate truth is you have to. The thing is, this is the understanding of Islam which is being presented to you. People complain. They say that, such and such is saying this is what Islam is saying, such and such is saying this is what Islam is saying. I'm confused. I don't know. What should I be taking? What should I be looking at? Well, the answer is that you, first of all, have an obligation upon you to be seeking knowledge. You need to be learning about the Sharia. There is no kind of alternative to that. The alternative is you just remain ignorant. That's not a viable alternative. That's just, whoever did it. But you have an obligation. طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةً عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ وَمُسْلِمَةٍ. That seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every man and woman. So you need to be actually doing that. And then here's another type of myth that follows from that. But of course, I've got some knowledge of Islam. I'm a Muslim. Of course I've got some knowledge of what the Sharia of Islam is saying. I've been a Muslim my entire life. So why am I not entitled to some type of an opinion? You see, one answer to that is that's almost equivalent to saying, because you possess a physical anatomy, therefore you should have some opinion on anatomy and physiology. You should, because you've had a body all your life. You've been living with it. I mean, why is it that when it comes to matters of physiology or the actual matters of anatomy, you would have no expertise whatsoever from a scientific perspective if you haven't studied it, even though you've been yourself as long as you have been. Yet when it comes to Islam, people will feel, but I've been a Muslim, of course I'm entitled to my opinion on what Islam is actually saying. That's another type of myth. And why does it cause a problem? Well, it causes a problem when you start to get unqualified opinions circulating, adding to the confusion which is already there. And this is why we have a tradition of learning within Islam. So these are some of the things. So another type of myth that we are kind of then led into, and it's an interesting one, is that obviously when we think that, Islam is governing all aspects of our life, this Sharia is governing us, so surely it must have created for us an identity. It's created something for us to kind of, to identify as that I'm a Muslim. This is my identity. So this from one aspect you'd say that's once again, from an aspect it's correct, and from another aspect it's a myth. Then what do we mean that Islam created for you an identity? What do we mean by that? Did it create a particular uniform that it gave you? Weirdly, people when just thinking about the question will think, of course not. Although on the ground people will feel that no, perhaps it did. Did Islam come to kind of Arabicize almost the entire world? Like to turn everybody into what was an Arab? Was that what Islam came for? Did Islam come to spread just an Arabic culture? Is that what it came for? I mean, what? These are very pertinent questions. Today, you see, when we look at Islam and we look at how is it symbolized, how do you identify Islam? You'll be surprised to realize many of the things by which we identify Islam were perhaps completely, I mean, like let's say, okay, let's just look at a masjid. Islam is symbolized by a masjid, isn't it? A dome. Okay, was it there in the time of Salaf, in the time of the Sahaba, in the time of the Prophet, in the time of the companions? No. A minaret? No. Okay, what about the crescent and the star? Huh? Okay, but at least the Pakistani flag was there. No, I mean, okay. Okay, what about the shalwar kameez then? Topi, hat on the head. Was it there in the time of the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, or the No? Damn, we're running out of identity measures here. So when we think about what are the things that we identify Islam by, did Islam identify itself by this historically? And what is interesting is that it does. This is why I said in part, it's true that it did try to speak of an identity, but yet it had a myth which we carry around today, an urban myth about, no, it tried to teach you to kind of have a uniform or to have this or to have that. When the Prophet ﷺ was asked to identify a Muslim, he said that, "Man istaqbala qiblatana," whosoever faces our qibla, wa salla salatana, and prays or offers our prayer, wa akala dhabihatana, and he eats from our meat, فَذَلِكَ الْمُسْلِمِ, and that is a Muslim. How stark is the contrast today between what they were defining. And you think, okay, was that a one-off? Okay, was that a one-off? Maybe the Prophet ﷺ said that just there. Maybe the Sahaba had a whole different concept. Is that so? Let's fast forward a bit. Go to the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, and the unfortunate event of Abu Lu'lu' al-Majusi when he'd actually, and his assassination of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he stabs him during the Salah and Umar is taken away. And now, when he's at home and the Sahaba are visiting him, and Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu comes to him, and he says to him that, and he says that you were right, because there was this debate about non-Muslims were entering Medina and they were taking up residency and stuff like this, and there was a discussion amongst the Sahaba that should we allow this? And Ibn Abbas had said that there is the Quran or the Sunnah does not teach us to stop this. So why are we imposing rules which are not there in the Sharia? So that was what they went with. That is what Umar had gone with. So now he's obviously there at home, and he'd been stabbed and he was on his deathbed. And at this stage, Ibn Abbas comes to him and he says that, I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that we should have imposed to prevent these people from coming into Medina, then this wouldn't have happened. He's telling this to Umar. And then he says to Umar, you know what, we'll have them all expelled from Medina. So we've fast forwarded, we've gone, look how we're all through the Caliphate of Abu Bakr, right through to the end of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. Right, and what does Umar ibn al-Khattab say? He says, La. But why not? He says, no, but why not? He says, Al-an, he says, now, بَعْدَ أَنْ أَكَلُوا ذَبِيحَتَنَا وَاسْتَقْبَلُوا قِبْلَتَنَا. He says, what now, after they've eaten our meat and they faced our qibla? Meaning that, these people have become a part of our society now. Now you want to expel them? But the point is, what I was highlighting was that, look, for identity, he still referred to the exact same criteria from that hadith. But the problem is, if we use that criteria today, everybody would just look totally different. Because if the only thing is whether we eat halal meat and we pray to the same qibla, what do we do with our mechanisms of uniformity, of everybody being in one uniform? And so this type of, there's a lot of questions, shall I say, which really need to be raised. Another interesting myth this leads us to, okay, so this identity, and we see this a lot, the Sharia is something which needs to be imposed. Why not? It's a law, and what do you do with laws? You impose them. So therefore, the Sharia needs to be imposed. And this, once again, it's got some truths to what it's saying, and it's got some myths. The Sharia, yes, obviously it's a legal system. It's a method to govern your entire life. Of course, it would have its sphere to be imposed, to be operational. That is the purpose of it. Is it there to just be imposed upon people? And this is going, we've got this problem here within the UK, big time. Many people going around, no, the Sharia needs to be here, Sharia needs to be this, it needs to be there. We need to impose this, we need to do that. Otherwise, we're failing the Sharia. Okay, so as Imam Shatibi said, let's go back to the early community. Let's see what they were doing. So we're going to rewind, go back. Let's go to the time of the legend, Imam Malik, Imam Dar al-Hijrah. The legend, the Imam of Medina al-Munawwara. Let's take a look at what was happening in his time. So Imam Malik, he is the authority. You've got legislation is in place, got the control, things are going on. Let's look at some of the rulings. I'll tell you a very good place to start looking. Since we're looking at this map, we're trying to figure out who should we start looking at. Let's look at the non-Muslims that are there. No point looking at the Muslims, because they're obviously going to be part of the system. Let's look at the non-Muslims. Now, were there non-Muslims living within Muslim societies? Yeah, they were, and they had a specific term given to them. The people of Dhimma. Okay, the people of Dhimma, this type of responsibility. Now, let's look at the rulings to do with the people of Dhimma. Now, here's a surprise that Imam Malik is asked, and it's reported in the Mudawwana, which is, he's being asked by his student Ibn al-Qasim. And he's being asked about matters of nikah, marriage. And he says, tell me, he says, you know, the people of Dhimma getting married to each other. Is their nikah valid? So Imam Malik responds, he says, look, it's upon their deen. You know, what they do, khalas, it's valid and this and that, and we don't object to it. And then they start getting into some technical debates. And then Ibn al-Qasim asks him, so let's say they were people of Dhimma who got married at that time and now they became Muslim. But when they got married, they used things like, I don't know, like for the mahar, he gave her alcohol or he gave her pork. Would we still allow it now? Because Islam doesn't recognize that. So Imam Malik says, look, it's their thing. It's valid for them, pork or whatever. So then he asks Imam Malik, he says, okay, what about when these people of Dhimma come to us, لِنَحْكُمْ فِيهِمْ, so that we can give judgment in them, so we can be the judges, so we can judge in their matters. I would say that's an ideal opportunity to land with the imposition of the Sharia. That's it right there. Like, think about it. Hometown, Islam. Got no opposition. Here's the non-Muslims living there. They come to you. They actually come to you. Or we know that there's this issue going on. Shouldn't we just step in? That is the ideal place to step in. What does Imam Malik say? He says, La yu'arrad lahum. He says, we don't get involved in their matters. And he said, what if somebody wants, what if he does? Imam Malik says, I don't like that he does, but if he chooses to, then let him judge by Islam. But it doesn't stop there. The questions go on. So he asks Imam Malik, the questions start to go from, he says, really, so we won't get involved? He says, no. He says, okay, so what if they're doing this wrong and that wrong? He says, no. And this is in the Mudawwana. He asks Imam Malik then, okay, What if they are conducting marriages which are incestuous? So a son is marrying his mother. Right here within hometown Islam, within the Muslim community, they're marrying, brother is marrying sister, father is marrying daughter. He asks him this, he says, what does Imam Malik say? He says, La yu'arrad lahum. He says, we leave them alone. He says, if that's their deen, then that's their deen. Even though that is in our deen, qat'an haram. Clearly. I mean, that is interesting as a side on a tangential note. They say there's a principle in Islam that within usul, legal theory, that there is no generic text except it has been specified. Ma min amin illa wa qad khus. They say that there is no ruling which hasn't been specified in Islam. So for example, if Allah says pray, but then there's going to be the child who is not obligatory for him to pray, so it specifies him out of it. It's going to be let's say somebody who's not capable mentally of praying, they're going to be excused. There's always like some people who have been excused. There is no generic text except it has an exception. So Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, legendary scholar, says, you know what, that really got me thinking. So he says, I thought, there's got to be one. He thought, but they all accept that, they accept the fact that Allah is all powerful. And those verses, they say that those are not specified, but we're talking about verses to do with rulings. He says, I thought, nah, there's got to be one. So we started to look. And then he says, Allahu Akbar, I found one. See, that's scholarship. He goes, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ. That your mothers have been made haram for you to marry. He says there's no specification to that. There's no exceptions. I mean, so now coming back to the point that you see, so this understanding, this myth that we have to impose Islam, we have to impose the Sharia. You can see that there was an ideal opportunity to impose it. What is the legend, the Imam of Darul Hijrah responding with? La yu'arrad lahum, that we leave them alone, you don't go to them. That it's their way, leave them. And this is within the Muslim type of communities. So I think, and there are several other type of myths we see, which once again are questions. Like, if somebody, an interesting one is, isn't the Sharia or isn't Islam built upon struggle? What would you think? No? Isn't it built upon struggling? Isn't that that's the whole thing of the, yeah? No? Somebody is saying, hell, no, no way. But you see, in part, that is correct. It has a history of struggle to it. It has a history of being established. The whole people, when they want to do something, they don't feel like it. You don't feel like praying. You don't feel like doing this. You don't feel like, so there is that struggle. That's correct. However, there is a myth, a huge myth that is also incorporated in that. Imam al-Shatibi writes in his Muwafaqat once again, he says that طَلَبُ الْمُشَقَّةِ غَيْرُ مَقْصُودٍ بِهَا فِي الشَّرْعِ. And he says that seeking out hardship has never been intended by the Sharia. If it comes and you bear it, Allah will reward you. Should you go out looking for it? Never. That is not what Islam has come with. But there is this, but it may have hardships with it. Some, like, so a person's going to Hajj, there's hardships there. He's bearing them, he's getting rewarded. But it's not telling you to seek out the hardship per se. But this is a huge myth as well sometimes. People feel that, no, this is no, Islam is there for a particular reason. I need to feel that struggle. So I'm not feeling a struggle. I knew someone once who, he was a student studying alongside with us when we were back in the madrasa days. Right? So, and this person, he would kind of set his bed in this type of lobby where you had all this excessive heat coming out from the air conditioners and stuff like this and all this. And he would that's where he would rest. suffering. I mean, it's hot enough as it was Pakistan. So on top of that, this guy it was an absolute sauna. So I remember seeing that, and I asked the guy, I said, what on earth are you, what's happening here? Oh, no, it's just I was feeling a bit cold, I was feeling a bit this, and then he eventually said, oh, you know what it is, that the Sahaba went through difficulties. You're thinking, look, this is not what the Sharia is asking you to do. There is no reward whatsoever in this, what you are doing. This seeking talabul mashaqqa is ghayr maqsood. It is not intended by the Sharia. So you doing that is just ignorance. You're only like suffering and making yourself, torturing yourself really. There's no reward in it from Islam. But these, are really some of the things. And another interesting, speaking of torture, another interesting thing is that, see, when we say Sharia, there's another myth. Or I suppose it's got some truths to it, like all of the things we've said before. Is, or the hudud, the Sharia, the capital punishment system within Islam, is that the Sharia? Sharia has a criminal justice system to it, just as any legal system will have. When you look at the books of fiqh and their volumes, it's like a section of the last volume usually that deals with the criminal justice system within Islam. And you'll deal with whether it's going to be this or robberies or whatever, and the punishments or the type of penalties that are conducted. What about all of this? What happened to all the other volumes? People will feel that, right, okay, I want the Sharia. I want the Sharia. I want it here. I want the Sharia. Okay, so what do you want? What do you want? What do you? I want people's hands to be cut off. It's like, chill out a little. We understand your passion for what you're trying to say, but that is not what the Sharia is about. Have you ever heard in a place people saying, I want the Sharia, I want the Sharia. So what do you want? I want education for everybody. I want everybody to have a literacy rate. I want there to be a hospital system, a medical system for everyone. Or a welfare system, as the Muslims have had traditionally with the Baytul Mal and the other derivatives that they set up from it. Nobody would they ever say something like that. That's what I want, the Sharia, I want the Sharia. What do you want? Yeah, I want everybody to be learning, I want this, I want trade. And no, don't worry about that. We'll sort all of that out. Let's first of all, I think people need to be killed. So this attitude is not the attitude of the early generation. This is not their attitude at all. When Imam Malik was asked, how will people in the later generations become rectified? That when we're hearing that every generation becomes worse than the one which, and so on and so on. And he said that they will only be reformed by that which reformed the early community. That this is, and in a hadith, that ummati kal matar, that my ummah is like the rain. La yudra awwaluha khayrun am akhiruha. That we don't know whether the khayr will come in the beginning or the end, meaning that there will be goodness in the end as well. Just not to have a pessimistic approach that, oh no, we're so far from the Prophet ﷺ's time, therefore everybody's just full of, nonsense and everything's just so terrible. And it does not mean that at all. So we're taking a look at really a lot of things to do with the Sharia in terms of myths. These are questions. The point, the objective of raising these today is that you go away and maybe just think about what has actually been said. It's more about just kind of thinking, okay, that wait a minute, a lot of questions, we are in a day and age when a lot of questions are being asked. There's a lot going on. And so people are asking, and now there's all these debates going on TV and on this, on the social media and so on. And some of them are maybe problematic and some may be aimed at Islam to attack them. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't look into these questions. But I tell you where that's going to begin. That's going to begin with each and every one of us taking the responsibility to learn for ourselves. So when we go away from here today, everybody should be thinking, well, what am I doing to learn? What am I doing to learn the Arabic language? What am I doing to learn about fiqh, about how to practice salah, how to kind of pray, how to conduct my fasts, how to do these? What am I doing about that? Because if the answer is very little, then that explains the situation that we are in. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.